So, good morning, good afternoon, or even good evening to some of you, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's IIoT World Manufacturing Day session on the importance of having a good data strategy, sponsored today by HighByte and EMQ. First off, it'd be great if you could tell us who you are and where you are in the chat function. It's always nice to get a feel for who's joining us. While you do that, get settled in, grab a coffee, whatever you need to do. There are a few bits of housekeeping that I just need to get out of the way first. The session is going to last just shy of an hour. We'll be introducing the topic and the panelists, obviously, and we'll be getting a lot of valuable insights from those panelists, I'm sure, on the topic. But we are going to leave some time at the end for questions from the most important people in the room, you, our audience, of course. And if you could do me a favor and put your questions in the Q&A tool, not the chat, that will just make it easier for us to find them, and it's more likely that you'll get your question answered as well. And you'll just be making my life a bit easier, which is always nice. We're also going to be having a quick poll, which we'll be running during the session. It's only 2 questions, so it'd be great if you could take part in that as well. And before we get started, I just wanted to highlight the fact that, as I'm sure most of you are aware, the IIoT World runs a number of events throughout the year, and there are some great ones coming up. And I just wanted to give you a quick heads up about those events as well. So we have Energy Day on June the 28th. We have Smart Buildings Day on September 27th. ICS Cybersecurity Day on October 25th. And the Manufacturing Supply Chain Day on December the 7th. And I'm sure some of you here may be particularly interested in that one as well. You can find all the latest details about those events on the IIoT World website. And with that said, I think it's time to get started on today's session. As I mentioned, we're talking about data strategy today and the importance of having a good one. What are the critical components of that strategy? What are the best practices for developing and implementing a data strategy that really aligns with business objectives, right? Because technology is the enabler, if you like, but it needs to be enabling business objectives. So we need to definitely have a focus on that. Among other things, our panelists are going to be talking about how IoT data infrastructure affects data quality, how engineers can get started on improving that data quality, and how we can better express the ROI as well when we talk about data. We'll also be looking at what I like to call the people factor. It's something that often gets overlooked when we're talking about very technical subjects like this, but it's extremely important, obviously, because without the right people involved, then any data strategy or any other kind of strategy, for that matter, is doomed to failure, really. And then we're also going to be gazing into our crystal ball a little bit to talk about how data strategy might evolve over the next few years. One piece of bad news to get out of the way first as well. We were due to be joined by Natalie Marcotte, SVP and President of Process Automation from Schneider Electric. Unfortunately, she's had to pull out at the last minute and send her apologies, but we are going to try and cover the topics that she would have been speaking about. I've already spoken to our other panelists, and they feel like they have some contributions to make there as well. So hopefully that will cover that. The good news is that all our panelists have more time to delve into the details of what they're talking about, and it may also leave a bit more time than usual for your questions as well. So please do get those questions into the Q&A function as soon as you think of them. Don't leave it till the end, just get them in there, and then we have a nice set of questions to round off the session. So without further ado, I'm going to now introduce our panelists. And first off, we have John Harrington, Chief Product Officer at HighByte, one of our sponsors today. John is passionate about delivering technology that improves productivity and safety in manufacturing and industrial environments. And he spent his 25-year career both delivering software to manufacturers and working for manufacturers in operations roles. And this experience has given him a unique perspective on how suppliers and end users each play a really important role in implementing these new technology solutions. And today, John Harrington is Chief Product Officer at HighByte. He's focused on product management, customer and partner success, and company strategy, so he's got a lot on his plate. And his areas of responsibility include market research, customer use cases, product priorities, go-to-market, and financial planning. So welcome, John.
Thank you, Hamish.
Then we have Josh Eastburn, Director of Technical Marketing at EMQ, our other sponsor today. After more than a decade as a control systems integrator, automation engineer, product manager, and marketer, Josh Eastburn now works as the Director of Technical Marketing at EMQ. And he studied computer science at Cal Poly and began his career supporting process equipment for semiconductor giants like Intel, TSMC, and Samsung. Later projects included applications and end users in projects in the petrochemical, food and beverage, and life sciences industries. And as a marketer, he strives to represent the real-world concerns of technical decision makers with respect and integrity in all his marketing work. So welcome, Josh.
Hi, thanks very much.
And next we have Amy Burke, Advanced Manufacturing and Mobility Account and Market Leader at EY. Amy has more than 25 years of experience enabling people and processes with technology to help companies embrace the power of digital transformation, which is a big part of our sessions here today. Her passion is helping people and organizations use technology capabilities to empower employees and deliver successful customer experiences. In her current role, Amy serves as a senior leader on large transformation programs and works with clients to understand their goals and challenges to provide comprehensive services. She works with global teams to raise awareness of the key challenges and finds ways for companies with manufacturing operations to optimize their businesses. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
And last, and if I'm honest, almost certainly least, we have me, Hamish McKenzie, your moderator for this session. I have been running my consulting, advisory and coaching practice from here in Munich, Germany since 2006. And I specialize in helping B2B technology businesses release the invisible brakes on their growth, especially when it comes to their positioning and strategy. So I work with clients in Europe, America, Asia, help them set strategy and position their products around customer outcomes rather than the technology features that I know technology companies love to focus on, but customer outcomes is where it's all at as far as I'm concerned. I'm also a certified Marshall Goldsmith stakeholder-centered executive coach. And if you'd like to find out more about me, what I do, please do look me up on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Hamish McKenzie in Munich, so I shouldn't be too difficult to find. And I'd love to get connected with you. Last final reminder, please get your questions into the Q&A section. Don't use the chat, use the Q&A section. That would be really, really helpful. Try and keep the questions as short and clear as possible. And an extra bit of help would be if you specify the person that you would actually like to ask the question to. So that's enough about the panelists. We all know who we are. We all know why we're here. Let's get started. And I usually find that a good place to start with all these topics is at the beginning. And John, I wanted to come to you first. It's the why question. Why is having a sound data strategy so important for manufacturers in 2023?
Yeah, Hamish, thank you. It's a good question, and I think what you have to look at is, a lot of people, all the people that are attending this event, and the sheer number of people is incredible and is great, and it's because companies are trying to leverage data much more than they ever did in the past, and they're specifically trying to leverage industrial data, so data from the factory floor and the factory floor systems. So what we're seeing is they're trying to use this data not just in the OT domain, which is what they've been using it in the past, but using it throughout the business and even the extended business. They could be sharing it with their vendors or their customers. So it's really kind of, they're using it to drive things like, in the past, we're using it just to control our factories. Now we're using it for predictive maintenance. We're using it for operational metrics. We're using it for quality and traceability, supply chain, R&D. So the number of consumers of the data, people who want access to the information, has just dramatically increased from what we've had in the past. In the past, it was pretty siloed. The other thing that we're seeing is a lot more data in general, because we're adding a lot more sensors and a lot more data capture. The sophistication of the tooling on the factory floor is much greater, and there's a lot of data on that factory floor. So you combine more consumers with more with more sources, and you've just got a lot more data. You have step changes or more in terms of the volume, and you're also needing to, we've done two things. One is that we've spanned this, taken the data out of the OT domain who really understand it and moved it into consumers who may not understand how the factory floor is laid out. They know their own discipline and they know how their discipline affects the factory, but they don't understand how it's laid out and all the automation. So you need to contextualize that data for them, and you need to deliver it to them wherever they are. And in many cases, when you're contextualizing it, you're combining it with data from different systems. So you may take a new smart sensor that you put on the factory floor, combine that information with what's going on in the automation at the time that you're collecting it. So the telemetry data, combine that information with, if you're doing predictive asset maintenance, maybe like CMMS data or SCADA information, so that you get this rich data set that you can work with. Well, the challenge is that our traditional systems applied this concept called the Purdue model or ISA 95 model, where you had a layered approach to moving data up the stack, and it's just too much data to abide by that anymore. Each system still exists, but a lot of times people want to pull that data out of those different systems in order to analyze it to solve their new, the use cases. So the key is, how do we solve these problems? How do we get information to people where they are, when they need it, at the resolution that they need it? And in order to do that, we need a strategy. The old approach of just kind of wiring up one system at a time doesn't scale, and we need solutions that are scalable, that's maintainable, and data that's usable in order to deliver all this information that we have to get the business value. But ultimately, it's to achieve that business value, we need stable solutions in place in order to deliver that. So that's where the data strategy comes into play, versus before the strategy was very simple. We're going to hook this system up to that system. Now we need to take a holistic view of what we're trying to accomplish, what systems are out there, and how we can best do it. Take more of an engineered approach.
Right. And so, I mean, I think, it's safe to say most manufacturers out there, they know they need to do more. Maybe they've had a strategy in place, but because technologies are changing so fast, and as you're saying, maybe they're implementing more sensors, much faster than they were before, and the volume of data they're getting is just growing exponentially. So when you look at that overall data strategy, what are kind of some of the key components that need to be in there, that the must-haves, I guess?
Yeah, I think well, first thing, you need to recognize that this is an ecosystem, and a strategy is an approach or with a vision, and then there's an execution portion after you have the strategy in place. But yeah. So we have this ecosystem of systems, of people, of use cases. You really need to understand the problems that you're trying to solve at a broad scale. Where those problems need to be solved. It could be at the edge. Some companies are doing edge analytics. It could be in the factory. We need to deliver better data to our operators. Could be in the cloud because we've got our quality team that is used to using cloud-based systems, or could even be mobile. Where get a good idea of what the scope of the solution that you're looking for, and then really leverage this concept that came out of the IT world called data ops, and now is being adopted in the OT world, but we call it industrial data ops, is really taking a more disciplined approach of identifying the team that's involved, so the OT team, the IT team, the business users, identifying what are the processes that we can use to deliver data effectively, to scale things out, to integrate systems effectively. And then there's new technologies that we're seeing come into play, like different protocols like MQTT, unified namespace, data lakes, data lake houses. There's lots of technology, but combining a more holistic approach to really focus on delivering information at scale. I kind of think of it as like, you need to think of your data connections almost like you need highways and then you need local roads, right? And you need to think of it as a way of routing information effectively, similar to our, I wouldn't say that our road structure is ideal, but it's certainly a lot better than our current approach to data, which tends to be just pass everything on these tiny local roads all over the place, and we'll just, if we need a new connection, we'll just route a new local road. We need some super highway technology. We need some local technology, and we need to be able to think of it as a real network and a mesh of moving data.
Right, right. And just one supplementary question on that, in terms of, because you mentioned, the people and, from different areas that need to come together. So, I mean, who is ideally involved in setting the data strategy? Is it a collaborative effort? Is it better if it's done top down, bottom up? How does that look?
I mean, I think the data strategy is combined with the business strategy, or it falls out of the business
Right.
strategy of the enterprise, and it is considering it needs to consider all the potential users, because ultimately the users of that data helps define the scope of the data strategy, right?
Right.
And so really understanding what are the business problems and the scope of the business that we're addressing, and then rolling that into the data strategy is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that came out in the session that I ran earlier, on digital transformation. It's getting that buy-in from different types of people, and ensuring that it's not just pushed through and without any connection to the business, because we need to modernize, or we need to digitize, or we need to do something with our data. That connection to the business is absolutely key. All right, so thank you very much for that, John. I want to move on now to talk about a couple of things. It seems to me that when we're talking about data strategy and data in general, there's two topics that come up time and time again: quality and security. And Josh, I wanted to come to you now and focus on that quality issue first, and ask you, how does IoT data infrastructure in particular impact that data quality?
Okay, so the funny thing about IIoT, when you explain it to people maybe for the first time, is that it doesn't actually sound that revolutionary, right? We've been collecting data from factories for a long time, right?
Yeah.
That concept is not a new one. And collecting more data, that's a great thing, but I think it misses the bigger picture here, right? So what else is there that's going along, or that comes along with that, or with the opportunity that we have here? John's touched on some of this, but I think the first things that come to mind for me are things like interoperability and data integrity, right? If we're thinking about probably, if you're here, you have an application in mind, there's an application that you're supporting that involves industrial data. But I think what John was really alluding to, what I wrote down in my notes here while I was listening to him, is the idea of treating data as a first-class resource, right? Not just a byproduct of the process, but something that you shepherd, something that somebody has ownership over, and it's its own system, right? That could serve many purposes. We're talking about things like productivity. That's an obvious starting point for a lot of us, but they can also drive innovation, product lifecycle management, a whole bunch of things there. And so interoperability across all of these different systems, different applications, different consumers, is a huge enabler of unlocking the value of that data, right? I think to what John was alluding to there is a lot of the data that is being consumed, or traditionally, right, maybe comes in a sort of a raw, unstructured format. It's not clear what the schema is. It's not clear how to make sense of it. So, whether you're moving all of that data into the cloud or whatever it is that you're doing with it, right, however big the pipeline is or however much you're collecting, there may not be actually a lot of value in that, right? There are additional transformations that need to happen in order for that to become an asset, right? If we're thinking about it like, a raw material that you're bringing into your process, this is a raw material that you're creating that could be fuel or input to other kinds of valuable applications, right? That you could create that then create their own value for the business. So your data strategy, I think an obvious starting point, besides just how do we collect all this data, is how are we going to structure this data in a way that will make sense of it, and that makes it usable for all of these applications that we're building. So that's an aspect of data quality that that probably we're not thinking about enough. And so that could include both the structure of the data and the schema of the data. Obviously, there's a lot of attention around things like Spark-Plug-B, right? If you're in the MQTT world, and that's because it's trying to address this problem specifically. And then data integrity, I mentioned that also, is a huge concern for some industries, and your data strategy can take that into consideration, right? The infrastructure in particular, since that was your question, if it gives you the tools that you need, right, to not just collect data, but also pre-process that data at different points in your ecosystem, right? Maybe that's filtering data, normalizing data, excluding data that's not going to be useful, aggregating data to make, to generate something that's going to be give you more insight, or establishing a chain of custody as data moves through the ecosystem. Those are all aspects that your infrastructure can support. And typically what I've seen so far is people get excited about something like MQTT, and then maybe they're taking kind of a piecemeal approach, right? We'll put an MQTT broker into our ecosystem, and that'll let us collect more data, right? And I think, while that is a great starting point, we're really just at the beginning of this. I think everybody's aware of that. Your infrastructure can support a lot more. I think John alluded to sort of, running edge services, right, to do analytics, but there's also so much more you can do to enable local use cases, in addition to kind of, whatever the large scale cloud app is that maybe, kicked off your initial kind of digital transformation push. But yeah, smart data infrastructure provides you options for doing more than just acquiring the data, but actually helps you to turn it into that kind of a valuable asset. I think good design allows you to delay decision-making until you have maximum information, right? So good infrastructure will give you options for building applications that allows you to stay flexible, right, in how you work with your data. Rather than, let's say, investing, in meeting the needs of one particular application, and then needing to initiate a new project or to restructure that data, or, revise your approach every time you want to build a new application. Getting back to the idea of having data as a first-class resource within your enterprise, right? So imagine having, we use the terms like data lake and data warehouse to give a sense of structure to all of that data, but that's almost the opposite of what it represents, right? Actually having a well of information that can be tapped into by any potential consumer in the enterprise, I think is what we're going for. And so, yeah, not just data collection, but the data quality makes is a big part of that, right? And the infrastructure that you put in place should serve the purpose of creating that kind of high quality or high value data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting you're saying that we're just at the beginning. So although, manufacturers have been collecting data from the factory floor for decades, the business literally the business of extracting value from it and getting more from it, and making it more useful is still in its infancy. And obviously with AI now, seeming to, it's going to pretty certainly mark a step change and accelerate the ability of all sorts of people to interpret this data better and extract more value from it. And I think we're going to touch on that aspect a bit later on as well. But it's definitely worth pointing out that it's this is actually still probably in its infancy in terms of the value that we're going to be getting from all this data in 5, 10, 20 years time.
Agreed.
All right.
Hey, Mitch, could I just
of course.
John, I really like what Josh just said about quality, in that, I want to reinforce that most times people think of data quality and they think, like a CRM system or an ERP system, quality is someone typed it in incorrectly, right? Or they use one abbreviation rather than a different abbreviation, or they should have, the way the one system collects it is different than another. In the reality is that in the industrial world, we have some of those problems, but we certainly don't have incorrectly typed in, because generally 90% of our data is automated, right? It's all coming out of automated systems. But the usability, like if you think of what does quality mean to a manufacturer or to anyone else, it's about a product that's usable by their customers, right? And so if you think of data quality as, is the product, the data, usable to the consumer, then you have a completely broader view of data quality. And so if you think about data quality as, what is the usability of this data, and who is going to use it, and how do I make it usable, then it really broadens the scope of data quality, which I think is a great comment and is a great, is something that people need to be thinking of. That it's not just about raw bits and bytes, it's about usable data sets that people can put to, start working with. So I just thought that was really powerful, the way that he explained it.
Yeah, and that's actually also an excellent segue into the next question I was going to ask him, which is in terms of usability, how do we, because it's not, you got the data, then you use it, and then you actually have to prove why that was valuable. And so what are some of the ways that we can prove the ROI on this data quality, especially for business decision makers, who are not going to know the ins and outs of SCADA and everything else. So, maybe you've got some ideas on that as well, Josh.
Yeah, sure. So I think there are real costs that are tied into data quality that can be quantified. In fact, I was surprised to hear recently from several top automakers that their goals with IoT are to reduce their time to market for new services. And in this context, we could think about applications, and to reduce the costs associated with that data. So compute cycles, bandwidth consumption. So what does it look like to drive those down to a minimum, right? Imagine that your process creates high quality consumable data at the source as a natural byproduct of operation, such that you can build new applications at the edge or in the cloud at any time without starting up a new project. And then tell me, what would the value of that be to the organization, right? Or another way to express that might be, going back to what we were talking about before, what's the time to value of data, right? So how long before an event happens in your process in the real world to the time when you can make a valuable decision with the data generated by that event, right? How long is it going to sit in a database? How long do you need to wait for a batch run to turn that data into something that's usable, right? Or are you actually living in the world of, real-time responsiveness, right? And then are the investments that you are making in your data infrastructure getting you closer to reducing that number? I think you can also think about how many new use cases you're enabling and the reduction in cost to fulfill those needs, right? So how much does it cost to spin up a new project, right? That's an easy, we're putting together this application, it cost us X, but now we've invested in improving our data infrastructure and we can do it in, right, X minus some number, right? There's some percentage that you're of productivity that you're gaining there on the data side. And it's hard because typically we're coming in thinking about the one big application that we're trying to build. But if you design it right, if you're willing to put in that investment up front, it's sort of like the tech debt concept that came from agile software, right? Of like reducing your tech debt, the overhead, right, that you're carrying of bugs and usability problems and the work that it takes to create good quality code. You can kind of think about that, I think, with data as well, right? By investing up front to create this valuable resource of data, then we're saving on the back end every time we want to expand the system, gain more intelligence, gain insight, right? Not just delivering this one particular application. And I think there's a similar concept maybe that you could take from Lean of like removing waste from the system, right? How many places in your organization have to repeat the same data transformations in order to turn this messy unstructured data into something that they can actually work with, right? Or because it was designed for one particular application and they need to convert it to use it for a different application, right? And those are happening everywhere in the organization that needs to consume that data because there's not one format that's interoperable across your entire organization. So that all sounds like money to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. Okay, so that was the first aspect. So I said I wanted to talk about two aspects. First one was quality. The second one is security. Now, just before I ask about that, Lubchin or Paul, could you please bring up the first poll question? There we go. So are you planning to implement, expand, or upgrade your IIoT infrastructure in the next 12 months? Yes, no, or I don't know. So while you're answering that, I'm going to ask John. This is a question I was going to ask Natalie about, but I think you've got a couple of insights here as well. In terms of data strategy and security, how can a strong data strategy help improve the security posture of a manufacturing plant overall?
Yeah, I think security starts with visibility, and security starts with knowing where the data is coming from, how it's moving around the network, where it's landing, where it's ending. So for starters, I believe that a lot of companies today and a lot of companies with the approaches that they're taking of kind of custom coding, unique paths, end up losing visibility into how is data moving. And so the first step is creating a strategy, because then in putting some solutions in place that allow you to see what data is moving. Like, even if you don't secure it, if you can know where it's moving and monitor that movement, then you're a leg up on security. The next leg up is often utilizing secure protocols and kind of securing or encrypting and utilizing secure technologies as close to the source as possible, such that because in the industrial world, a lot of our systems aren't very secure. It was never designed for security first, and at some level, it can't be secure because the speed at which data is moving in some of these use cases, it just needs to be insecure. One of the most interesting things that we found at HighByte is one of the key use cases is moving files. There are still a lot of systems that write data to a CSV file, and that's the most efficient way for them to write it and for that data to be collected. Well, a file inherently is not, a CSV file is not secure. But if you can pick it up and then you can transport it across secure means, then all of a sudden it is secure. So first understanding where the data is coming to and where it's going, and then utilizing a lot of the modern day technologies around MQTT, around HTTP, around in a secure method, OPC UA, will help us get a much more secure environment. And then you can start really troubleshooting and going in and seeing, how do we make things even more secure? But I think that that's kind of the starting point. Okay,
perfect. Thank you very much for stepping in on that one, John. All right, so we've talked a lot about the data itself, but as I mentioned at the beginning, the people aspect is also incredibly important when it comes to making a success of a data strategy. And so, Amy, I wanted to come to you. It's a very technical topic, but it's easy to forget sometimes that there are actually people, despite ChatGPT and AI and all the rest of it, we're talking about people in terms of creating strategy and, more importantly, implementing it. So, I mean, how do you see the importance of data and emerging technologies? How is that changing the way that people are working in the manufacturing industry?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that one of the most significant challenges we need to solve in the world of manufacturing is how we transition the workforce into new ways of working. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we've done recently is partner with the Oxford School of Business and the Manufacturing Institute to do some research with companies around really how much change is happening or needed within the job descriptions, and what are they thinking about doing about it. And so what we found is about 74% of the skills for a manufacturing job are substantially changing. And the good news is 82% of companies have decided that they have recognized that and have decided they're going to be investing in new ways of learning and new ways of thinking about career progression and so forth. So the awareness is there and there's a desire to do something about it. I think where many companies get stuck is, okay, so what do we do? Because, we understand that while automation is changing the way people interact with data and machines and technology, it's evolving so rapidly, feels like you're always going to be behind the game and bringing your workforce up to speed.
Yeah.
And so it's for that reason that one of the things that we've been piloting with organizations is this concept of adaptive skills. And so in addition to kind of skills that you might need to know how to do data analytics or data science or whatever it might be in terms of your technical field, what we find is adaptive skills is really going to be critical to manufacturers so that their workforce can continue to grow and adapt to the environment. So some examples of adaptive skills would be analytical acumen, business acumen, creative reasoning, learning agility, systems thinking, and root cause analysis. So those, many of those skills or capabilities are things that we do expect of those in manufacturing roles. It just depends on the level maybe at which we're infusing those learnings into the job. So, needless to say, organizations looking at both how do I bring in the right skills, but also how do I equip my people with the adaptive skills. And what we find is kind of two things are most helpful in making that transition. One is immersive learning. So as much as possible, actually utilizing the capabilities, understanding how to apply it, real life simulation, use cases on the job training. So immersive is very key. And the other is an individual learning plan. So, historically, we like to say, here's the 5 courses that this job or this role needs to take. You get everybody through those 5 courses and you move on. And what we find is, based on the nature of the skill sets that are needed today and the mindset, if you will, of a younger generation that is really focused on their career path and learning and seeing that progression, is you need tools that will help assess where they're at compared to where they need to be, and then develop a customized individual learning plan for them. And so those are the area that we're seeing companies explore a lot, is in what technologies can I use to help me both define a skill set for a job and be able to refine it rather quickly, and then have individuals be able to self-assess where they're at against those skills and create a learning plan that can continue to evolve based on where they're at or what changes happen in the environment. So I think, generally speaking, just the way in which we are approaching training, the way in which we're engaging with our workforce, definitely strong evolution is going to need to happen there, in addition to the evolution of the technology itself.
Right. Okay. And so when you mentioned growth there a minute ago, and despite all the hype around AI and ChatGPT and all these automation, whatever it may be, what most of my clients are still telling me, we can't find the people. We need more people. We can't find the right people. So when it comes to growing your workforce, are there specific issues there? Is it that that the manufacturers are looking for different types of people, or people that don't exist? What are the issues there when they're trying to grow?
It's a very fair question. I think that it might have been the North American Manufacturing Group, NAM, is estimating that we could be, there could be 2.1 million jobs unfilled by 2030 if we don't figure this out, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd say one of the, quotes or pieces of feedback from a vice president at DuPont said, we can't be looking for the square person to put into the square hole, right? Your aperture has to open up more significantly to the types of people that could be coming in to fulfill these roles. And then you allow your training and your immersive experiences to help them learn how to apply whatever skill set they're bringing to the table and grow them from there. So yes, number one is open up the aperture of what you're looking for in terms of filling those jobs. Number two is, you have to invest in their training to retain them. So there's the attracting part of it, and then there's the retaining part of it. And the more that you have a solid strategy around your training and adaptive skills and learning how to grow with the company, what we find is the more attractive that employer is to the new generations and to a broader population of folks who maybe wouldn't have thought about working in manufacturing historically, as well as the retention. Right.
Absolutely. It always goes hand in hand, I find. Okay, and there's one other question I was going to ask Natalie about. One of the unique things about today's workforce, not just in manufacturing, but generally, is that we've got 3, 4, 5 generations of people working together. Right? You can have a 20-year-old working alongside a 70-year-old, and are there any ways that data can be used to improve productivity across that generational gap?
Yeah, I think, to your point, each of those generations may come at technology, and the familiarity or how comfortable they are in using technology varies. And so understanding that, I think part of what we talk about is, when you do any type of transformation, whether it be a small, department level or a large enterprise transformation, you need to put kind of humans at the center. And putting humans at the center means I'm really basing any of the change I'm going to do around the different roles, the personas that are going to be in play, who I'm going to be impacting, and where they're at now and what they might need out of this transformation. And so while you may have various generations within those personas, the persona part of it is still very key. And then you can, layer in based on the data that you can get around the population that fills that role, any nuances that you want to based on the generation. So yes, data can be used to inform personas. Data can be used as well through technology to understand kind of the sentiment. So there's a lot of tools today. You don't have to rely upon getting a focus group or doing interviews. You can use technology to understand the sentiment of the workforce around various issues. And that also will help you kind of ferret out where maybe a generational, where there's a generational influence on a piece of the technology or a piece of the solution that you're trying to implement.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating topic, and it's one that's just gonna keep getting more important, I think.
Could I jump in with a comment on that?
Sure.
Yeah, I was just thinking while you were talking there, Amy, about data as an enabler of innovation, right? And I think, and you'll know the data better than I do, but I feel like having the opportunity to innovate within your role is really important for employee retention long term, right? If we can set up systems within our organizations that give, either whether this is like emergent behavior or whether this is kind of a top-down strategic approach, I think either way could work, right? But making data a tool that frontline employees have to be able to innovate within their space, right? To solve problems. And yeah, that'll require some reskilling, like you said, Amy, right? To get workers in there who know how to work with data and use that to solve problems in the work that they're doing. But I think that could be important both for retention and for productivity, right? We enable a workforce to solve problems rather than waiting for all of those problems to percolate up to the top and then the results or the solutions to trickle back down.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yep, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and so as I said, I think this is gonna, this is only going to become more important in the future, especially this innovation aspect, as you were mentioning. And while we're on the subject of future and innovation, I wanted to ask you also, Amy, to kind of look into your crystal ball a little bit. So starting at the point we're at now, where AI in particular is starting to really change so many different roles and just introduce change generally. How do you see that change happening, and how do you see it playing out and affecting data strategy over the next few years?
Yeah, and it's a good question. And like you said, nobody has a crystal ball to see how generative AI is going to play out in the world. I know you guys have a session, it looks like, on that tomorrow. So I encourage everybody to attend and kind of hear some perspectives around that. But my view is that organizations are today at some point in the spectrum of maturity around leveraging, having a data strategy, putting it into use and achieving results. And so over the next 5 years, I think we're going to continue to see companies obviously moving up that spectrum in terms of maturity, but they'll still be at all different places depending on their situation. I think of an organization who maybe has grown through acquisition. And so they have, this plethora of systems and an ecosystem that's very complicated. And the approach that they might take to data over the next 5 years might look a little bit different from a greenfield. You have the opportunity, let's think about all the battery investments that are coming into the US for new plants. When you have a greenfield opportunity, it's awesome, right? To be able to start from scratch with a true good data strategy and a common data model. So I think they'll continue to evolve through the spectrum. But that being said, I think companies will increasingly look at not just the application of data against a use case, but how do we bring data across the enterprise together in a common data platform. So having a common data model, having a common data platform that kind of sits above so that you can get to things like this elusive digital thread and a connected plant and being able to solve problems at that next level of complexity. And so being able to, think about it that way. And I think Josh and John both talked about things that if you begin with the end in mind and you put some of those pieces into your data strategy, then as you evolve, you're going to be able to naturally make it, through that to that next level in terms of the ability to do a connected ecosystem as opposed to just a connected solution or a connected, part of the facility. So that's where we see it, evolution and kind of increasing the level of connectivity across the enterprise.
Right. Absolutely. Perfect. Okay, so I want to make sure we leave some time for some audience questions, but I do want to ask you guys to kind of to give the audience some practical next steps, if you like, in terms of not all the topics we've discussed, but some of them. In the meantime, Lucian, can you maybe just put up the second poll question quickly? That would be very helpful. Thank you very much. And while you guys are answering that, it shouldn't take you too long. I want to just, as I said, ask the guys to wrap up a little bit in terms of, or give some practical insight into where people can get started. Because as I think we've said in this session and the previous one, sometimes there's a level of overwhelm at the beginning and just not really being clear on, okay, what is the first step? So, John, if I can come to you first. Now, I don't have a manufacturing business, but let's just imagine for one ridiculous moment that I do. And maybe I've never had a coherent data strategy, or maybe I do have one, but I've realized that because of all the new technologies coming in, it needs a serious refresh, right? I need to look at it again. So yep. Where's the one place that I should start?
Well, I think the one thing that you should start with is learning. Right, is reaching out. There's LinkedIn there's tons of information being broadcast across LinkedIn, and a lot of free information, and just going and learning is important. There's also a Discord server that was put up by a group called 4.0 Solutions. It's also very powerful. Lots of like-minded engineering types of OT data who are very interested about these topics. I'm from HighByte, so the HighByte website has a lot of information as well as our YouTube channel. We've got a white paper, we call it Data Ops White Paper, as well as a data modeling guidebook that can be downloaded and read. I would also start out by looking at what is your team, what are the use cases you're addressing, what are the technologies out there like unified namespace, data lakes, the cloud, and just and then it's pick your first business use case and start doing it. Start solving. The technology today doesn't need, it's not like implementing a new MES where you have to do, a big bang where you have to shut everything down and bring up something new. You can incrementally solve these problems. You can try new technologies. You can start working with it, get familiar with it and grow, but you need to have that vision or else you could be going, you don't want to go down dead ends. So that's where I would start, learning HighByte website and then starting to do.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much for that, John.
Yes.
All right, Josh, I'm going to use a metaphor here, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure it's going to work, but I'm going to go with it anyway. So believe it or not, I've spent the last 48 hours of my life trying to find a mouse in my house. We couldn't find it anywhere. But we did eventually manage to corner it, capture it, and free it. Now let's imagine that instead of trying to find a mouse, what I actually need to do is to corner, capture, and free the value in my data. Where do I start?
Okay, good. Oh, that's a fun way to set this up because I was thinking while John was talking, like, what would be a fun, provocative answer to this that I feel like is honest? And I think it answers your question also. And it's this: how about we don't start by deciding what we're going to use the data for? What if we first thought about what does good data look like? And then let's go build infrastructure that delivers that. After that, the applications flow easily, right?
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much. That's definitely something to chew on. So I guess what does that mean? I mean, it means I need to, I think you need to think about what kind of mouse it is I'm trying to, what's the ideal mouse that I'd like to capture?
Yeah. What does it look like for your organization?
Yeah.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you. And Amy, so just going back to the people topic. So, you know, I want to make sure that my workforce is basically being made future ready, right? For all the new technologies that are coming in within the manufacturing context. Where should I start?
Where should you start? That's a good question. So I think, you know, wherever that is the talent organization, if there's HR within each business unit or whatnot, you know, I think partnering with them as the business, the manufacturing business, and understanding where you're at today and your digital strategy so that you understand what types of skill sets and transitions you need to take the workforce through is kind of, and making sure that they understand that. I find, you know, HR organizations or talent organizations don't always truly understand the manufacturing environment or the shop floor environment. And so, you know, figuring out how to cross that bridge, because it's going to be critical to being able to put in strategies for attracting, training, and retaining the new workforce as well. So I think getting on the same page with the organization that's going to support you in that digital strategy is a good first step. I think a good second step is starting to explore these concepts around adaptive skills and seeing where you're at and exploring tools and that can provide data that can help you understand where you're at today and be more targeted in how you apply the learning and the kind of improvement processes in terms of education, immersive training, and so forth. So I think a targeted approach is going to be much better than just saying high level and saying, you know, we need to have more data scientists. Well, okay, that's great. But, you know, so that's the two places that I would start.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much, Amy. Now we have a few minutes left to get into some questions from the audience, and we have a couple of absolute belters, I think. So this is from Scott Phillips. I work with a lot of small, medium manufacturers in Michigan. About 80% of our manufacturers are 50 people or less in the workforce, right? And their data infrastructure consists of, I love the way he's described this, tribal knowledge, paper, email, spreadsheets, Word documents, whiteboards, and maybe a historian as well. So how would you, you know, if that's the mindset, if that's the infrastructure they've got in place, you know, there's a lot of inertia there, I would imagine. So how are you going to get them to understand or get interested in starting this modernization process when it comes to their data strategy? Who wants to go first?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
You wanted to go?
No.
I think it's a challenge because these aren't light projects to take on. On the other hand, I do think that focusing on, I always say, focus on solving problems. Like, what are they trying to do? Are they trying to be take cost out of the business? Are they trying to be more reactive, more agile as a business? Are they trying to you know, increase their revenue? And starting there and working your way down and solving problems, because none of us can start from scratch. You know, you got to start from where you're at and start moving the business forward. But it does have to be, you know, having a strong data strategy, having a strong data knowledge and intelligence within the organization. That's another great place to start. Teach the people what having data means and how it could help them. And then they'll start finding the best projects.
Yeah, and so perhaps focusing on the business outcomes that this is going to bring. If they do, you know, what is this going to bring to my business, and just talking about those business outcomes first before you even start getting into the whole technology topic, perhaps. And maybe also to Amy's you know, point and area of expertise, they need to kind of recognize and consider that maybe they need to get some fresh blood into the organization. Either that and or look at upskilling as well. I guess a combination of those things is also going to be helpful in that instance. Would you agree, Amy?
Yeah, I absolutely would. And I think going back to the teach people the value of data and how to use it, and they'll find ways to apply it, is a very we underestimate the amount of continuous improvement and driving. Most of these organizations are all built around how do we continue to improve every day. And so once they figure out how to get the right data in their hands and useful data in their hands, they're almost pre-wired to go ahead and take advantage of it and drive it forward.
Yeah, it almost becomes a flywheel, right? It's like it feeds us. One successful project will feed off, more projects will get started, and then their success feeds more projects. So what we find similar to that is you need a couple of key successes, and you need to get it going and get people educated so that they're thinking along, how do I use data instead of how do I just walk onto the factory floor and pick things out, with my eyes. Now I can see it all. I can see a lot more in a data set than I can walking the floor once or twice an hour and trying to figure it out. Or if you're an operator looking at one machine, now you can look at 10 or 50 machines.
Yeah, you can frame it up in different ways depending on what's valuable for them, right? Whether that's reducing labor costs, improving productivity, or driving their innovation. Data can be relevant to all of those things. So understanding, what they care about, and then framing up, in that way.
Okay, perfect. All right, we've not got long left, but I'm going to go for another one, and we'll try to make sure that we get these questions answered. If we don't get to it live, then we'll get them answered after the event. One from Chris Bunai. It's quite a technical one. How would you approach standardizing and structuring data to allow for meaningful bucketing of downtime causes as an addition, specifically downtime causes, as an additional layer of useful information around availability component within OEE, for example?
Yeah, I mean, HighByte has a solution that's designed around standardizing and structuring data and for solving problems like this, and like you said, Hamish, downtime causes are just one of many use cases, right? That's just one use case, and trying to identify what are the topics that we need, what are we trying to, again, what is the problem that we're solving, what are the options, where can we source the data, and delivering on that. There are technology solutions designed for that, and HighByte has one, but there are others out there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much on that, John. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of the session. We're out of time, so I'm gonna have to stop it there. I would like to say thank you to our panelists for their insights and their knowledge. It's been a really great session. Thank you again to the sponsors, in particular HighByte and EMQ. Your support ensures that we can put on events like this, so thank you. And thanks to everyone who attended as well. Great questions coming in, and we will try to address the ones we didn't get to after the events. Now it is time to move to the next session, which is benefits of connecting the plant floor to the cloud, sponsored by GE Digital. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day, and have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone. See you later. Nice to meet you, Amy and Josh and Hamish.
Thank you.
Thank you.